I can't believe I'm actually sitting here typing this out, but I need to know, was I a visionary? Or was I a monster for what I did to my family's legacy? They say blood is thicker than water, but have you ever seen how fast blood dries when it's under the heat of a multi-million-dollar spotlight? I turned my grandfather's dying legacy of hand-carved puppets into a global empire worth millions. But in the process, I tore my family apart and left my own brother homeless and screaming at my gates. Looking back at the wreckage of the last 5 years, I have to ask you straight up. Would you sacrifice the people you love to save a dying art? Or would you let the art die to keep the peace? Tell me if I was the villain in this story, because some days, I wake up in my penthouse and I'm not even sure who I see in the mirror anymore. It all started in a dusty, cramped basement in a small town that most people forget exists. My grandfather, Silas, was a master puppeteer. Not the kind you see on kids' shows today with bright foam and googly eyes, but the old-world kind. He carved intricate, hauntingly beautiful marionettes out of dark walnut and oak. Growing up, that basement was my entire world. I spent every summer inhaling the scent of wood shavings and turpentine, watching him breathe life into these silent wooden actors. He used to tell me that every piece of wood has a soul trapped inside, and it was the carver's job to set it free. I believed him. I spent hours watching his gnarled hands move with a precision that defied his age, turning a block of timber into a weeping widow or a mischievous jester. He would whisper to the wood as he worked, treating each puppet like a child he was bringing into a world that didn't quite understand them. I remember the weight of the chisel in my own small hands when he first let me try. The resistance of the grain, the heat of the friction, and the sheer satisfaction when a sliver of wood curled away to reveal a cheekbone or a brow. But while I saw the magic, the rest of the world saw a dying hobby. The town moved on, the children started playing video games, and the theater shows that used to draw crowds from 3 counties over became empty echoes of a bygone era. The local theater, where Silas used to perform every Saturday night, was converted into a discount appliance store. People stopped looking for craftsmanship and started looking for convenience. By the time Silas passed away, the family workshop was drowning in debt. My parents wanted to sell the building to a developer who was going to turn it into a trendy coffee shop, and my older brother, Leo, just wanted to auction off the puppets as vintage curiosities to pay off his gambling debts. They saw firewood and floor space. I saw a gold mine hidden in the strings. I remember the day of the funeral. Rain was lashing against the windows of the old shop as we gathered to discuss the disposal of the estate. My mother was crying, not for Silas, but because of the property taxes and the mounting pressure from the bank. She kept talking about how practical it would be to just let it go. Leo was already on his phone, checking eBay prices for antique wood carvings, his eyes darting around the room like a vulture looking for the choicest cut of meat. He didn't even have the decency to wait until the body was cold before he started pricing out Silas's life's work. I stood in the corner, holding one of Silas's final pieces, a puppet he called the Watcher. It had glass eyes that seemed to follow you and joints so smooth it moved like water. It was terrifyingly lifelike, draped in tattered velvet that smelled of cedar and thyme. That's when the idea hit me. We were living in a digital age starved for something tactile, something eerie, something real. I told them right then and there that I wasn't selling. I told them I was going to take these puppets and make them famous. Leo laughed in my face, a harsh, grating sound that echoed off the empty workbenches. He called me a delusional kid playing with dolls, and told me I was wasting my life on a ghost's hobby. My parents sighed, looking at me with pity, and told me I had 6 months to make the shop profitable, or they'd sign the demolition papers. They didn't believe in me. They just wanted to clear their consciences before they let the wrecking ball swing. I spent those first few months in total isolation. I slept on a cot in the workshop, surrounded by the silent gaze of 100 wooden eyes. I poured every cent of my meager savings into a high-end camera and a lighting kit. I didn't just make puppet shows. I created cinematic, dark fantasy short films using Silas's marionettes. I stayed up until 4 a.m. every night, learning how to edit, how to manipulate shadows, and how to write scripts that made these wooden figures feel more human than the people around me. I researched folklore, occult history, and psychological horror to give each puppet a narrative weight that felt ancient. I learned how to use fishing line and specialized rigs to make the puppets move in ways that defied physics on camera. I learned about lighting ratios and frame rates to ensure the wood grain looked like weathered skin under the lens. The first video I posted went viral within 48 hours. It wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural moment. People were obsessed with the uncanny valley feel of the puppets. They wanted to know the story behind the carvings, the history of Silas, and if the puppets were actually haunted. Within a month, I had 1 million followers. Within 3 months, a major streaming studio reached out. They didn't just want a show, they wanted a franchise. They wanted the Silas Collection to be the face of a new dark fantasy universe, complete with feature films and a streaming series. Suddenly, the dolls Leo laughed at were worth more than the land the shop sat on. I signed a deal for 7 figures, but there was a catch. The studio needed total control over the intellectual property. They wanted to mass-produce replicas, launch a line of high-end collectibles, and build an immersive theme park attraction. To do that, I had to legally own the entirety of Silas's workshop and every single design he ever created. This is where things got ugly. Because Silas died without a clear will for the business assets, the ownership was split between me, my parents, and Leo. I offered to buy them out for a fair price, more than enough for my parents to retire and for Leo to clear his debts. I thought they would be proud. I thought they would see that I had saved us from the brink of ruin. But once Leo saw the numbers on the contract I was about to sign with the studio, his greed turned into a fever. He refused to sell his share. He claimed that because he was the eldest son, he should be the CEO of the new company. He didn't know a thing about puppetry, digital marketing, or storytelling. He just saw the millions in the headline and decided he was entitled to half of it for doing absolutely nothing. He started a legal battle that lasted a year, freezing the studio deal and nearly bankrupting me in legal fees. Every time I made progress, he'd file another frivolous motion. He claimed I was exploiting our grandfather's memory, even though he was the one who wanted to burn the workshop down 6 months prior. My parents took his side because they didn't want to choose between their children, which in reality meant they were choosing his chaos over my vision. They kept telling me, "He's your brother, just give him what he wants," ignoring the fact that what he wanted would have tanked the entire deal. I was working 18-hour days to keep the hype alive online while my own brother was filing injunctions to stop me from even filming in the basement. He started leaking fake stories to the press, saying I had stolen the puppets, and that Silas would have hated what I was doing. It got so bad that he showed up one night with a crowbar, drunk and screaming, threatening to smash the Watcher and the other original puppets if I didn't sign over 51% of the company to him right then and there. I had to call the police on my own brother while he tried to break down the door of the workshop that had been my only sanctuary. I sat there in the dark after the police took him away, holding a chisel for protection, realizing that the family I loved was becoming the primary obstacle to the legacy I was trying to save. I was exhausted physically and mentally. The studio was threatening to pull out because of the legal instability. My parents were calling me a cold-hearted businessman for not letting Leo help. They didn't see the irony. Leo didn't want to help. He wanted to harvest. So that was the situation I was in. I was standing in the dark with a man who shared my blood but wanted to destroy my soul's work for a paycheck. He'd just gamble away. I was looking at the faces of Silas's creations, the last remnants of a master's life, and I knew that if Leo got control, they'd be sold to the highest bidder or ruined by his incompetence within a year. I had a choice. I could give in, let him ruin everything Silas worked for, and watch my dream die, or I could play a game so dirty it would change our family forever. Before I tell you the absolute cold-blooded move I made to win, I want you to pause right now. Go to the comments and tell me, if your own sibling was holding your future hostage out of pure greed, would you protect the family bond? Or would you protect your dream at any cost? What would you have done in my shoes? I didn't give him the 51%. Instead, I used the one thing Leo didn't realize I had: documentation. While he was busy posturing for the cameras and trying to look like a businessman, I had been digging through Silas's old journals and financial records. In the back of a ledger from the 90s, I found something Leo had missed because he was too busy looking for cash. I found evidence that Silas had actually signed the shop over to me in a private deed of gift years ago, which he'd had notarized but never filed publicly because he didn't want to hurt Leo's feelings while he was still alive. Silas knew what Leo was. He knew his eldest son was a bottomless pit of need and vice. Silas had left a note with the deed, written in his shaky, elegant script saying, "To the one who hears the wood speak, the keys are yours." I had kept that deed a secret for months, hoping we could resolve things as a family, hoping Leo would show a shred of decency. But once the crowbar came out and the threat started, the gloves came off. I filed the deed. My lawyers moved with the speed of a strike team. We didn't just win the legal right to the shop. I countersued Leo for the damages caused by his delays, citing the loss of the initial studio timeline and the emotional distress of his harassment. I didn't stop there. I found every debt he owed, every bridge he'd burned, and I used my new capital to buy up his liabilities. I became his primary creditor. I used every legal loophole available to ensure that not only did he get nothing, but he actually owed the estate, and me, more than his remaining assets were worth. When the final judgment came down, the look on his face wasn't just anger. It was pure, unadulterated shock. He thought he was playing a game of checkers, and I had been playing a game of total annihilation. The studio deal went through, and it was bigger than I ever imagined. The Silas Collection became a global phenomenon. I moved the operations to a massive facility in the city, employing hundreds of artists, engineers, and puppeteers to continue my grandfather's tradition. I launched an academy to teach the nearly lost art of woodcarving. I became a millionaire overnight, then a multi-millionaire a year later. But the victory tasted like ash. My parents haven't spoken to me since the day the court-ordered bailiffs evicted Leo from the property and seized his car to pay the legal debts. They didn't see a successful son. They saw a predator. They see me as the person who robbed his brother and stole the family legacy through a technicality. They don't see the years of labor, the vision, or the fact that Leo would have destroyed it all. Leo ended up losing everything in the countersuit and his subsequent gambling benders. He went from a luxury apartment he couldn't afford to a shelter, and eventually to the streets. Last I heard, he's working a dead-end job at a warehouse and telling anyone who will listen that I'm a cold-hearted fraud who cheated him out of his inheritance. I offered to pay for my parents' medical bills and a new house in a better climate, but they returned the checks torn into pieces, mailed back in envelopes that smelled like the old workshop. My mother sent a letter once, just one sentence. "You have your wood, but you no longer have a mother." I saved the art. I made Silas a household name. His puppets are now icons of cinema, seen by tens of millions of people who find beauty in the shadows just like I did. But the price was the only family I had. I sit in my office now, high above the city, surrounded by the original marionettes in climate-controlled glass cases. I have everything I ever wanted. The resources to build anything, the respect of the industry, and a fortune that will last lifetimes. But the silence is deafening. Sometimes, late at night, I feel like I'm just another puppet on a string, being moved by the ghost of a legacy that demanded everything I had. I'm rich beyond my wildest dreams, but I spend my holidays alone in a mansion that feels more like a museum than a home. I did what I had to do to ensure the puppets didn't end up in a landfill or a pawn shop, but in doing so, I became the very thing my brother accused me of being, someone who put the wood and the paint above the flesh and blood. I look at the watcher sometimes and I swear those glass eyes are judging me. I see my grandfather's reflection in the glass, and I wonder if he's proud that his name is on billboards, or if he's horrified that his grandchildren haven't spoken in years. My brother's life is a wreck, my parents are aging in bitterness, and I am the king of a wooden empire. I have tried to reach out, to offer olive branches, but every attempt is met with a wall of silence or a demand for money that I know will just be used to fuel Leo's self-destruction. At the end of the day, success isn't just about the zeros in your bank account. It's about who is standing next to you when you reach the top. I reached the summit, but I'm the only one here. Was it worth it? To me, seeing Silas's vision live on forever is my greatest achievement, but the silence from my mother's phone is a heavy price to pay. I keep thinking about that night in the rain, wondering if there was another way, but deep down, I know people like Leo don't stop until they've burned everything down. I had to choose between a masterpiece and a mess, and I chose the masterpiece. Maybe that makes me a visionary. Maybe it makes me a monster. If you think I was right to protect the legacy at the cost of my family, like this video and let me know you're on my side. If you think I'm a monster for choosing art over my own brother, tell me why in the comments. I actually want to hear your perspective. Subscribe for more stories about the dark side of success and the reality of building an empire. And share your final thoughts on this whole mess below. I'll see you all in the next story.